Welcome back to the Own It 10-Minute Skill Swap. I'm Morgan Meyer, intern at the DLE Leadership Experience and an undergraduate at Syracuse University. With help from DLE subject matter experts, the 10-Minute Skill Swap zeroes in on one skill that can give you a boost personally or professionally and provides actionable tips and coaching from a subject matter expert. In this installment, entrepreneur Jon Katz shares his tips for successful networking in the digital age.
So it's just a presentation that I put together for networking from home, since we're all dealing with coronavirus and the lockdowns. And then, once you get back into the field, how can you really take advantage of it? And so I put together, just some key words and some thoughts that I think everybody can resonate with. And I know maybe some of the older folks on the chat might feel like they're experts at this, and they probably are a little bit better than the younger folks. But I figured it's fair to at least get a refresher on how you can take advantage of this very online connected world we're in, as there's many opportunities, as I've seen, to do so. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, if I can do that. Okay. Okay, cool. So we're going to try and keep this 10 minutes. I'm going to start a timer. So making connections and networking in 10 minutes. So selling yourself, right? So at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, it's all about selling yourself. When people see or hear you online, it's the first time that they're seeing you or hearing from you. So you always want to have your best foot forward. And dressing appropriately or professionally, depends on the event you're going to, right? Is kind of that first step. And going forward, before you begin, you want to have goals and understand what you actually want from these networking groups, from these networking events, and if you even want to, grow your network, right? I would hope that you'd want to grow your own network. So having some goals in mind is, I would say, or some expectations of what you want to do would be the best thing to do first. So secondly, social media plus in-person presence. This is kind of what I was talking about, making sure, your social media is all buttoned down. So your LinkedIn description is good, it's accurate. All of your job, descriptions are accurate to who you are, what you're currently doing, making sure on your LinkedIn you actually have a cover photo that's attractive. I have a Boston, skyline, and that kind of is emblematic that I'm in Boston, right? And so when other people in Boston see that, they might think, oh, that's a cool picture, first of all, right? But they're also saying, oh, this guy is in Boston as well. So having that done as well, having a great profile picture, not you in the club like I had at a previous work experience. We had some upper management of pictures with them in a club, which is kind of crazy. So not having that. And then in-person presence. So, like I said, making sure you're looking the part. We're not always going to be going to a professional networking event, right? We're not always going to have to be dressing up in a button-down shirt, at least for guys, right? Or a nice blouse maybe for women. We can throw on maybe a team uniform if we're going to a sporting event. Every chance you have in this outside world to interact with people is basically networking, and you kind of have to see that as such. And then having a good mindset and expectations, right? So mindset is everything. That's what I learned pretty young in college. It determines your mood. It determines if you're going to smile. It determines if you're going to frown. These are kind of just basic things, but kind of psyching yourself up maybe to go to this networking event or this event that you're going to meet a lot of cool people at is important. And then having expectations. I like to say have zero expectations, because the more expectations you have, then the more chances you feel disappointed even during the event. And to be honest with you, when you're going to these events and you're saying, oh, I want to try and make a meaningful connection, I have this expectation to do so, you might feel a little like pressure. And it's good to have goals, right? Do you want to meet a certain amount of people during the week or during the month? But if you have zero expectations of people, then you just get disappointed less, and you can just move on it. Some of these people that you meet, obviously will not continue the conversation. So, but again, it's up to you for the most part. So that's just a little, quick tips before you begin. So networking from home. LinkedIn is your best friend. Online friends connections should almost always be passive. And I felt the best way to kind of iterate this is that when you're in a Facebook group, let's say, you're not you're not there to make connections, but inevitably they just kind of happen. And it's a great way to just talk to people, right? And on Facebook. So I was a part of this New Milford, Connecticut group, and I remember I said, oh, does anyone have a small business in here, right? And of course, some of them did. And I was like, oh, can I talk to you? Blah, blah, blah. And so what I did was I had 2 or 3 people who owned small businesses, and we were just chatting about, our businesses. I talked about Blundy, and then they talked about theirs. One had an Etsy shop. Were making $100,000 in Etsy. And that's amazing, right? And so just by commenting on these Facebook posts is such a passive way to just make friends and to just, foster conversation. And I said as a quick tip here that you can oh, here we go. So introverts, this is like your best thing, right? I know sometimes I can even be an introvert. I'm a little bit of both, but this is the time to shine. You can go on LinkedIn, you can find someone in your in your industry that you can connect with and just talk with. Like, let's say I'm in wealth management, or let's say I want to talk to someone who's more experienced in wealth management. What I would do is go on LinkedIn and say, wealth management in Boston, right? Find maybe some people with different companies, connect with them, and then boom, send them a note, and then just start the conversation. It's just to learn, right? These are ways you can make connections. So connecting from home, build up your professional social networks, like I said. LinkedIn friend and connection requests. So these include Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, right? And these are people who you might be following, let's say, like the DLE leadership Instagram page, right? And then you see, oh, on the following, or whoever commented on the post, let's say Marcus, right? Marcus comments and you don't even know who Marcus is. And you say, oh, hey, Marcus, I just joined the DLE leadership group. Nice to meet you. I'm John, yada, yada. What made you join, right? Some type of open-ended question like that is great. And just building up these connections is fantastic. I'd say the more, the merrier, quite honestly. And sometimes, I'm a person who just sends out like requests and connections just kind of willy-nilly, but I figured the more the merrier. And then post thought-provoking content articles. So a lot of people have been doing that a lot on social media. I might caution you to not post political things, especially on Facebook. I don't think that that's probably the best way. And quite honestly, in my opinion, not everybody cares about your opinion on what's going on in the world. But if you post thought-provoking, questions, or maybe deeper questions about humanity or something like that, right? Or even about business, you can get great attention, and you can, kind of foster this conversation in these things. And then taking it a step further, let's say you saw something on leadership, great article on leadership, right? And you wanted to post that to the Do Leadership group or some type of thing, and you said, oh, what are your thoughts on this, right? You always want to have a call to action on these articles and content pieces that you're posting. You always want to say, what are your thoughts going for, what are your thoughts after you read this? Please comment below. You see this with YouTubers, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, right? It's just going a step forward to foster that conversation. And then once you have these LinkedIn, connections, and you're talking with someone, let's say, you're talking with someone on Facebook, like I did with this New Milford group, I said, okay, can we get in a conversation and talk more about your business and how can we grow? And, hopefully they'll say yes, or at least, ask for their time, ask nicely, ask in a nice manner, say, I completely understand if you don't have time to talk right now, just looking for 10 to 15 minutes. I had a question that I could ask you, kind of taking that sales mentality, right? Just looking for a little bit of time, 10 to 15 minutes. If someone can't dedicate 10 to 15 minutes of their time to you, then I don't know, then that's just like, it's not, you should just move on. You can try 1 or 2 more times, but if they're not willing to do so, then it's just not worth your time sometimes. And then going forward, that just solidifies a relationship. So you take it that one step further. You can talk over text, you can talk over Messenger, or whatever it is. But when you're talking face to face, either via Zoom, or if you're talking on the phone, you can hear their voice. It just solidifies that connection. And I think it's it's good. And a lot of things, you know, when I have an email chain going on, I just like calling the person because it gets things done quicker. So now moving on to networking in the field, we'll eventually get back to life. And that's a picture of me actually at the Green Spoon Entrepreneurship Conference. And so this was an amazing conference. You can see my blondie there as well. I had a nice setup, and my mom's actually in the corner. I don't know if you can see that right there. She's not looking too amused, but she was. So I was selling obviously to a lot of people, explaining my story, right? And all these events are not traditional networking events. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But, you know, these events are important to go to. So really put your foot forward, I say, and especially when these things kind of clear up, hopefully in the fall, you know, maybe in the winter, when you can kind of get back out there. I know in Boston, I've been looking for tons of entrepreneur groups to be a part of, and just searching for these non-networking groups, I think, are just so essential because they're not just there to, you know, to network and find a job. You're there to just have conversations with other people, like-minded people. And that's the important thing. And that's kind of when the great real connections happen. Just like in this leadership group, quite honestly, I've talked with at least 4 or 5 people now. And obviously this is kind of a networking group, I'd imagine, but there's topics and things focused around this. So that's awesome. And then, like I said, go to Facebook, Eventbrite, and others. And then I said, dress nice, wear cologne or perfume, because you always like to smell nice. And it elicits, you know, emotional kind of a response. And then for the love of God, bring a breath mint or some gum because no one likes bad breath. Oh, and then a quick tip too, rotate your name upside down so people notice and comment. I remember some guy had his name tag upside down. So I was like, hey, your name tag is upside down. He's like, yes, I know. And then obviously he introduces himself. So should you go to networking night? No, don't do that. I would say if you're looking for a job, I would say don't do that. These events are mainly, you'll just find people are all looking for jobs. It's brutal and it's kind of sad sometimes. It's just not. It's trust me, you just won't get much out of it. And then I said skip the business cards for a tip. I'm not a big fan of business cards. I know some of you, some of the older people might be. You know, I just think, you know, cutting straight to the chase and going on LinkedIn and connecting with them is the best thing to do. I could be wrong, but I think, you know, with LinkedIn's QR code that you can scan, you know, each other's barcode, it just is easier. And if your LinkedIn is up to date, that's basically your business card. You know, you have all your contact info on there. So I think that's a much better idea. And I know it works for me, and you can grow your network by, you know, tenfold sometimes if you're going to some of these events. And how to remember names. So this is a cool little thing. So let's take my name, for example, Jon Katz. Obviously, Katz is you think of a cat, maybe you think of multiple cats, I'm not sure. But so when you say my name, right, if I said my name to you, Jon Katz, you'd say, oh, like a cat, you'd think of a cat. So in your mind, try and associate that person's name with an image. And then once you see that person again, you actually think of that image, and it's a great way to remember their name. And I would hope that if someone pictured a cat with my name, they'd at least remember my last name, Katz, and they could at least call me Mr. Katz without knowing my first name. They might forget it, you know. But it's always awkward when you're 5-10 minutes down the line in the event and you're like, oh, what was your name again? I would hope you would never ask that. That's brutal. That's very awkward. And then picking the event. So I said focus on non-networking events. That's not proper English, but you know what I mean. And focus on your passions and likes. So mine is Michigan. I love Michigan. And I went to an alumni bar, even though I'm not an alumni, and to watch the game. And I met alums, and they were, you know, great people. And a lot of them were MBA grads. And some of them even had connections to, you know, admissions. And quite honestly, when you're talking with these people, especially Michigan and especially Syracuse, right? These people are usually high ups in companies, you know, VP level, C-suite level, and you honestly never know who you might meet. And I do have some quick stories at the end that I'll share specifically to Michigan because Michigan has been insane for me in terms of networking. It's been the gift that keeps coming back just by being a fan. It's kind of crazy. So if connected with them on LinkedIn, you have to make sure that you're sending them, one takeaway or something, some piece of value specifically about them, like maybe an article. So let's say they're in, wealth management, and that, right? But you're not in wealth management. So the next day after you connect them on LinkedIn, you send them, oh, saw the market was up 500 points or something, and you send them that article. Not only does that keep the conversation going, but it solidifies, oh, this is the guy I met, or this is the girl I met last night, right? And that's so important. And then I said again, on your name tag, write something like, sales guru, marketing guru. That way, when someone comes up to you, they're like, oh, he's in sales. Oh, he's in marketing. Oh, he's good at leadership. Oh, maybe he's a professional speaker, right? It just fosters this conversation a little bit more. You can judge a book by its cover by seeing, who they are, by what they dress like, but you don't know really what they're bringing to the table. And saying you're a sales guru or marketing guru kind of just cuts to the chase and saying, oh, why are you a sales guru? Oh, why are you a marketing guru, right? But you have to have the wherewithal and the kind of forwardness to get out there and actually talk to them and ask them that question. So this is my best friend, Ben Leavitt. He is a great buddy of mine. He's actually in Canada, and I have a cool story about him. And this is kind of the beyond the interaction. This is the last slide, is that he actually reached out to me because I was on a podcast for Blendy. And he said, hey, man, I heard your podcast on, I think it was the Young and Dumb podcast. And he said, I have my own. It's called Do Dope Shit. And it's about young people who are just doing some cool stuff out there without saying the explicit word again. And he said, I would love to have you on the podcast, right? So we were talking, and then I forget how it happened, but I was like, oh, yeah, I'm a huge Michigan fan. And he's like, oh, no way, me too. And obviously he's right in Canada. He's about 2 hours away from Michigan. And I don't know, we just got, started talking. And I say, there's levels to this relationship stuff, right? You don't find your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband overnight. It's not going to happen over one LinkedIn request or your best friend, right? You have to take it to the first, second, and third gear. When I was an RA in Springfield College, one of the counselors who's a therapist said, I like to look at human relationships as gears. There's a first, second, and third, fourth, and fifth, just like a car. And the first gear is, maybe you see them at the networking event. The second gear is saying, hey, how are you doing? The day after. The third gear might be, oh, I was wondering your thoughts on this article, right? And then maybe the third gear could also consist of a phone call. That fourth gear is maybe that in-person meetup, right? And then that fifth gear is what I would say here is going to an actual Michigan game. In fact, my first ever Michigan game with Ben. So it was a really cool moment. And it was kind of a come to, a full circle moment, right? And now I talk to him all the time. He has a really cool YouTube channel, by the way. It's Ben Leavitt. I can link it to if you want. And he's grown it to 35,000 subscribers. He just quit his sales job and does YouTube. And he talks about social media growth, Instagram growth, how to build your own podcast. Really cool stuff. And he's an amazing guy, very genuine. And then I said, continue convo, keep asking questions, very open-ended. How are you doing with X? How are you adjusting to working at home? These are great questions to ask, to check in with people who are in your existing network and to grow your network. And I want to take a little step forward too. So I found another guy from Michigan. He was the chief marketing officer of Sears. Go figure, right? Crazy, but he actually had tickets to the Ohio State game. And if anyone doesn't know, the Michigan-Ohio State game is called the game. It's the biggest rivalry in all of sports, and it's been a bucket list item of mine for my entire life. And he gave me tickets, and I was so thankful. And so I got to meet up with him, and it's awesome. So you never know who you might meet, and just by being a Michigan fan, I've met some pretty cool people, some best friends too. And then, I just want to say one last thing too before we close this off. I might have gone a little over 10 minutes, but I forced myself when I got to Boston to create a small business podcast. And what this did was, I understood that sometimes, especially working full time, I couldn't always dedicate myself to to going after work at 5, 6 o'clock to these networking events, which I found were kind of bad, but doing these events, right? And so I said, how can I do this in a more effective manner? So I started this show called Small Biz Sunday, and I forced myself to talk to small business owners in the local Boston area and create and curate these connections, right? And I looked at it as kind of twofold. I said, not only am I creating connections, but maybe they can even sell Blendy in their shops. Who knows? So you can also, and then if I'm starting like a social media company, let's say, maybe they could be a customer. So these connections, not only do they provide emotional value, but they also provide kind of a monetary value, which I don't always like looking at relationships in a monetary sense. But let's be honest here, in business, sometimes you have to look at it as such. And going a step further again, once you become friends or whatever, your group who you surround yourself with, the connections you surround yourself with, are who you ultimately become. And you must surround yourself with successful people. And that's why I really don't like these networking events, because you're really not going to get much out of them if everybody's looking for a job. And if there's not really hiring managers, then it's just not really, I don't know, worth your time. You can kind of build off of each other in terms of sympathize with each other if you need a job, but you just don't get very far. And so that's what I found. But that's it. Oh, that's it. Just remember, it takes time to become comfortable at this, and you'll learn over time. Just embrace everything that comes into your life. So that's a very important last thing.
Thank you for listening. Stay current on all the DLE's great programming offered at no charge by reading our newsletter, The Hub. You can subscribe to The Hub and join our extraordinary community of motivated, supportive young professionals and experienced leaders at dle.duly.com.